This is a set of videos around the control phase in a domain-based process improvement project, and this specific video will be about the project close. The specific learning objectives are to take a look at the set of activities associated with the closeout, including the handoff to the process owner, and performing it in a punch-out or in a project closeout checklist manner. We'll also be taking a look at operating a lessons learned exercise, sometimes called a project postmortem, the last team-based exercise with the group. And finally, some thoughts on celebrating the end of the project and activities that you may want to include in the celebration itself. Unfortunately, I think that one of the most frequently skipped activities for a DMAIC style project is to do any form of a formal project closeout activity. And I think that it's necessary to do a closeout to help get better at future process improvement project work. You've taken a problem that's in current state where performance was low. You've moved that performance to a new higher value. You've used data-driven problem-solving techniques to help identify what the root causes were that were pinning that needle down. Once those root causes were determined, you built countermeasure solutions to attack or eliminate those root causes. And now performance has been measured and monitored to be at a higher sustained value. The checklist, the closeout checklist that I do, should satisfy at least one really important aspect of organizations that do project-driven work successfully. More and more of the research that we're starting to see come in on organizations that do project work successful says that they provide an opportunity to, I think one of the most important aspects of a project closeout checklist is so that you can formally release the team so that they don't get trapped into also now becoming the process subject matter experts, the ones that have to now take ownership of this process. Now, don't get me wrong, if you've got team members that are actually process workers, I'm not suggesting that they get relocated, but I find that sometimes these cross-functional teams, they end up becoming uh, uh, ad hoc process workers after the project work is done because no formal release has taken place. And you need that release so that they can rest, recoup, and prepare for new projects. There's a couple of tools that I'll use in a project closeout checklist, and it kind of depends upon the type of project. And in almost all cases, I'm taking the generic template and I'm modifying it to meet the specific needs of this particular process improvement project. So the Kaizen review evaluation checklist, I think, is a great starting point. I know that there are a few fields that I think are really important. Let me highlight a couple, knowing that you have access to the template yourself and you can certainly modify and make this your own. Okay, so I've zoomed in a little bit. I've highlighted 3 of the fields on this first page, and I'll highlight a couple more on the next page. But I think it's important to check in with the process owner and make sure that if there are any new problems with the process or if some of the current state frustrations have not yet been addressed, that we make sure to treat those as punch list items and eventually get those knocked out. So check in with the process owner in an official handoff. I'm also making sure that if there were any other project opportunities, whether they were Kaizen events or other domain-based projects, that they've been incorporated into the decision-making activities around process improvement project selection, filling the funnel, so to speak, with future project activities. I also like to perform a walkthrough to make sure that all of the SOPs that were created are being followed, and I typically do this with the process owner. I'm now on the second page of this checklist, and I like to, in my closeout with the process owner or sponsor or both, I like to make sure that we've got updated financial and organizational impact statements created. We've probably done a cost benefit analysis early in the project, but now that future state has been modified and we now have a new, better way of performing our work, we should reevaluate, recalculate that cost benefit analysis release. And sometimes it's not about cost, especially if you're in an environment that is more of a not-for-profit entity. I also like to make sure that our measure and monitoring tools that we're using in control are being utilized, and frequently I'll make sure that they're posted so that process workers and other stakeholders can see visually how an improvement to the workplace has occurred. And I always want to make sure that we schedule some form of a lessons learned exercise. And then I also like to make sure that there is a celebration. I have another checklist on the course materials website that I pull from our traditional phase-based project management curriculum. Let's take a look at that one next. Okay, I've zoomed in just a little bit, and let me go through some of the items that we haven't talked about that I think are important in this alternate version of a closeout checklist. If you're working in a process that is highly regulated. I'm thinking healthcare, medical, food processing are just some specific examples. Sometimes you have to go through a formal sign off in terms of the completed deliverables. And so I like to make sure that that's been taken care of. If this is a product driven process, I'd like to do some check ins with the actual customer to make sure that products are being fulfilled in the timely manner that are being requested. And again, earlier we talked about cost benefit analysis. Sometimes we are recalculating the benefits. Other times, now that the solutions have been implemented, we can recalculate the costs associated with those implemented solutions. And some sort of final report that can be used and then archived within the organization so that in the future, if other groups are working on processes similar to ours, they can learn from them. I like to make sure that there's some sort of final report. And the report doesn't have to be lengthy. Sometimes it's just a short document that links up to all of the other artifacts that were created, like your stakeholder list or your data sets or voice of customer interview results or histograms or findings from root cause analysis, and just point outs to where those artifacts are. Two more things, though, that I like to make sure are addressed with the this version of the closeout checklist. I like that it calls out specifically whether or not team members have been released. That's what the research is now starting to point to, that it's really important to get those team members formally released so they can go back, rest, recoup, get back to their day job activities, and prepare themselves for a new project that they get assigned to. And setting up a project celebration timeframe. These checklists are often done with the sponsor or with the process owner. And so while I've got them in the room, I like to carve out when we're going to do that project celebration. And what I'd like to do next is take a look at the lessons learned exercise I like to perform with the team, as well as elements to consider in your project celebration. The last meeting that I schedule with my team is for a lessons learned exercise or a post-mortem. And the reason why I'm doing it is because it's the primary way I'm going to go about improving our process improvement methods for future projects. And so the way that I schedule it, I tie it to the celebration. I say we're meeting on X date to do a celebration, but prior to the celebration, half an hour before, we're going to do a quick lessons learned exercise. So we tie the two together. And the tool that I use to help me run the lessons learned exercise is our old summary sheet. And I'm going to zoom in on it so we can see it just a little bit better. All right, I zoomed in just a little bit on my DMAIC summary sheet. We've used this tool for quite some time now, and it's on your course materials website. I'll meet with the team, and in the team environment, I will ask two questions for each of the phases. I'll ask, what went well? And then what could we do better? And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just ask about how did we do with the broad objectives of each phase. Other times I'll ask team members to comment on specific tools that we used and whether we could do a better job with the tools. In each case, I'm just walking through the summary sheet, which is a high-level review of all the activities in a DMAIC project, asking what went well and what could be done better. And the things that could be done better, those actionable items I'm taking back and working with other process improvement team leaders, whether you've got a office of continuous improvement or a project management office or just a user group of similar advocates for process improvement. I'll take that information back and work on trying to make those things better for the next project go around. After we've completed the lessons learned exercise, then we'll do a little group celebration. So a couple of closing thoughts about the celebration itself. The project's done, and the celebration should include some sort of acknowledgement of both the team and those involved stakeholders. They could be subject matter experts that were pulled in to help with specific tools or activities, the sponsor, process owner, other key decision makers, upstream suppliers, downstream customers that were actively involved. And acknowledgement is important. And I want the celebration to be meaningful, but I don't want it to be over the top. So like a cake celebration. It doesn't have to be so formalized that you are doing non-value added work just preparing for the event itself. Sometimes getting feedback from the team members early in the control phase on what they'd like to see in the celebration is a nice way. Another pro tip is right away in the project kickoff, one of the activities that I frequently perform is to ask team members to describe the process in current state in a couple of words. And those words are usually negative, things like it's slow, it's frustrating, it's painful. When the process has been improved and in future state, we're measuring and monitoring it in the control phase. I like to ask team members and process workers to describe the new process. And I do a little word cloud comparison during the celebration to help show the difference. It's a nice way that doesn't incorporate, any detailed process maps. Celebrations are meant to be fun. They're not necessarily meant to be a deep dive into an analysis of what was performed. I'd like to make sure that in the celebration we have some anecdotal stories about some of the benefits. Sometimes those are stories that team members or customers provide. I don't like the celebration to include training, but I'm not opposed to making a reference document to training available. For a lot of people, the celebration is the first time that they've heard about the changes made. And anytime there's a change to a system, I like to make sure that training is included. So I'll make certain that they know that people outside of the team and those directly involved in the project know where to go to get that training. I won't make the celebration actually be part of the training itself. Make it a reference document. And I am also using the celebration time as an opportunity to recruit future team members. I'll tell you, folks that I typically try not to recruit, and those are the existing team members of this project that we're closing down. We need them to be able to go back, rest, recoup, recover, and then be assigned to a future project. But for the very next projects taking place, I'm looking for others that are in the room to help. Oh boy, you were given a complex business problem and you decided that instead of doing simple shoot a solution that you would go through a data-driven step-by-step methodology to help improve current state. And you used a five-step methodology called DMAIC. And in the DMAIC, define and measure phases were about measuring current state, getting qualitative and quantitative data on what was currently happening. You use that to get to root causes. Those root causes then were the springboard for the specific solutions that we would try to implement to improve process performance. And in the control phase, we measured and monitored that future state performance. And in all phases, we were applying change management concepts to help increase user acceptance along the way. You have a process where frustration has been reduced, and you now have a workplace in which work has been made better. That's really all that you can hope for. And so now's the time to celebrate and rejoice in the work, effort, and success that you and your team have created.